He was supposed to be safe in his own home. A quiet morning in a suburban neighborhood turned into chaos when the pounding at his door shook the walls. They weren't police. They weren't military. They were HOA enforcers, armed, loud, and convinced they held the power. To them, he was just another black man to intimidate. But what they didn't know was that behind those calm eyes was someone trained for moments exactly like this. The question wasn't whether he'd survive. It was how far they'd regret underestimating him. The neighborhood looked peaceful on the surface, manicured lawns, trimmed hedges, and smiling neighbors waving as they passed. But beneath that picture-perfect setting was a quiet tension, one that few ever dared to speak about. For Marcus, a 60-year-old veteran and retired Navy SEAL, this neighborhood was supposed to be his sanctuary. After decades of service, he had chosen this community to live a calmer life, away from the chaos he once knew. His days were filled with routine, early morning jogs, reading in his study, and tending to the garden he had grown with his own hands. Yet, despite his achievements and the respect he had earned serving his country, Marcus often felt the stares. Neighbors who whispered a little too loudly when he walked by. Cars that slowed just a little too much when he was outside. It was subtle, but it was there. He knew what it was, even if they never said it outright. Still, Marcus never expected trouble to come pounding at his door. That morning started like any other. Coffee brewing, the quiet hum of the news in the background, the sound of birds outside. But then came the pounding, loud, aggressive, and unrelenting. A voice shouted from the other side, accusing him of being in violation. Violation of what? He had no idea. Yet the tone was clear. This wasn't a polite request. This was a show of force. And as Marcus stood frozen for a moment, a chilling realization washed over him. Whatever was waiting outside wasn't going to end with words. Marcus opened the door to find two men in dark tactical uniforms, sunglasses hiding their eyes, standing like they were on a battlefield instead of a suburban porch. Behind them, a woman clutched a clipboard, her expression stern, detached, like she was documenting a criminal case. The two men didn't greet him. They barked orders. Step outside. You're in violation. The words hit him like a hammer. Violation. He had paid his dues. Every HOA fee. Every community guideline. His lawn was immaculate. His home spotless. Still, their tone wasn't one of discussion. It was intimidation. And it was working, because Marcus could feel every neighbor's eyes from across the street. Blinds twitching. Heads peering through windows. The officers shoved a paper into his hand, covered in codes and citations he'd never seen before. His so-called offense? A flag displayed in his yard. The same flag he had carried on his uniform through deployments overseas. To him, it was a symbol of sacrifice. To them, they claimed, it was a violation of neighborhood aesthetics. Marcus tried to reason, but every word was cut off. One officer stepped closer, his hand brushing against the holster on his hip, an unspoken threat. The other gestured to the clipboard woman, who scribbled notes with cold precision. This wasn't a conversation, it was a trial, and the verdict had already been decided. Neighbors began to gather, curiosity drawing them to the edge of the yellow caution tape the officers had strung across the sidewalk. Phones came out. Cameras clicked. In that moment, Marcus wasn't just a man defending his property. He was a spectacle, a warning to anyone who dared to stand out. He felt anger boiling beneath his calm exterior. For decades, he had been trained to remain composed under pressure, to assess threats and respond with precision. But this wasn't combat. This was humiliation, dressed up as authority. He could hear whispers from the crowd. What did he do? Why are they here? Must be serious. Every assumption chipped away at his dignity. They didn't know him as the man who had served his country, who had risked his life countless times. To them, in this moment, he was just a black man standing accused. Then, the officer gave the command that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. If you don't comply, we'll remove you by force. The words echoed in his mind. He wasn't some stranger in this neighborhood. He wasn't a threat. Yet here he was, treated like a criminal, cornered in his own home. His instinct screamed at him to act, but his discipline kept him still for now. He knew one thing for certain. This confrontation was only the beginning. The air felt heavier, pressing against Marcus's chest as the officer's hand lingered near his holster. Time seemed to slow, the sound of neighbors murmuring blending into a low, unsettling hum. Marcus stood on the threshold of his own home, yet felt more trapped than he ever had in combat zones overseas. The officer took a step forward. "Final warning," he said, voice clipped, rehearsed, like he had delivered this threat 100 times before. The clipboard woman raised her pen, poised to record his response, as if every breath he took was already evidence against him. Marcus glanced at the paper still clenched in his hand. Codes, violations, words designed to strip him of rights under the guise of rules. It wasn't about aesthetics. It wasn't about compliance. It was about control. He could see it in the officer's stance, in the sneer that curved just slightly at the corner of his mouth. Neighbors' phones rose higher now, cameras glowing red. The crowd wanted to show, wanted to capture the exact moment this man, this decorated veteran, would be dragged across his own lawn like a criminal. The tension was suffocating, electric, ready to explode. Marcus's heartbeat thundered in his ears. Every instinct drilled into him through Navy SEAL training roared awake. Assess, anticipate, act. He saw the twitch in the officer's shoulder, the weight shift in his stance. He knew what was coming before it happened. The officer lunged forward, reaching for Marcus's arm. In a flash, the world snapped into clarity. Marcus moved, not with aggression, but with precision. His hand intercepted the grip, twisting just enough to break the hold without escalation. His body turned, placing him in control of the space. Eyes locked on the man who moments ago thought he held all the power. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Phone shook, zooming in. The clipboard woman froze, her pen hovering midair. For the first time, the officers looked unsure. Marcus's voice was steady, commanding, carrying the weight of a man who had faced far greater threats. Not here. Not today. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, the entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. The officer's hand dropped, his confidence fractured under the weight of Marcus's unflinching gaze. The second officer shifted uneasily, no longer so eager to play enforcer with dozens of cameras, recording every detail. The clipboard woman cleared her throat, her voice suddenly less certain. We'll revisit this matter later. But the words rang hollow, flimsy against the reality that had just unfolded. She scribbled something quickly on her paper, retreating behind formality as if it could shield her from the truth. Their power play had failed. Marcus released his grip and stepped back, reclaiming his doorway with quiet authority. He didn't need to shout, didn't need to prove anything. His restraint spoke louder than anger ever could. He was a man who had defended his country, who had faced life and death countless times. And yet here he was, forced to defend his dignity in his own neighborhood. The neighbors dispersed slowly, some shaking their heads, others whispering about what they had witnessed. A few left their phones lowered, eyes filled with something heavier than curiosity, respect, shame, reflection. That night, Marcus sat alone in his living room, the glow of streetlights seeping through the blinds. The paper with its codes and violations lay crumpled on the table, insignificant compared to what had really happened. He had endured another battle, one that no military training could fully prepare him for. The battle of perception, the battle of being seen, judged, diminished, simply for the color of his skin. But he also knew the cameras had captured something powerful, not just an attempted injustice, but resistance, dignity, strength, and maybe, just maybe, the reminder that silence in the face of oppression only fuels it further. He exhaled slowly, the question heavy in his chest. How many more times would this story repeat in countless neighborhoods across America before real change came? If stories like this move you, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe, so more people see the truth that too often gets ignored. Together, we make sure these stories don't get buried.